Carlos Castaneda's The Second Ring of Power, Chapter 1, The Transformation of Dona Soledad, Part 2. Didn't the Nawal teach you to accept your fate? Dona Soledad asked as she trailed behind me. That one out there is no ordinary dog. That dog has power. He is a warrior. He will do what he has to do, even kill you. I had a moment of uncontrollable frustration and grabbed her by the shoulders and growled. She did not seem surprised or affected by my sudden outburst. She turned her back to me and dropped her shawl to the floor. Her back was very strong and beautiful. I had an irresistible, irrepressible urge to hit her, and I ran my hand across her shoulders instead. Her skin was soft and smooth. Her arms and shoulders were muscular without being big. She seemed to have a minimal layer of fat that rounded off her muscles and gave her upper body the appearance of smoothness. And yet, when I pushed on any part of it with the tips of my fingers, I could feel the hardness of unseen muscles below the smooth surface. I did not want to look at her breast. She walked to a roofed, opened area in back of the house that served as a kitchen. I followed her. She sat down on a bench and calmly washed her feet in a pail. While she was putting on her sandals, I went with great trepidation into a new outhouse that had been built in the back. She was standing by the door when I came out. "You like to talk," she said casually, leading me into her room. "There is no hurry. Now we can talk forever." She picked up my writing pad from the top of her chest of drawers, where she must have placed it herself, and handed it to me with exaggerated care. Then she pulled up her bedspread and folded it neatly and put it on top of the same chest of drawers. I noticed then that the two chests were the colors of the walls, yellowish white, and the bed, without the spread on it, was pinkish red, more or less the color of the floor. The bedspread, on the other hand, was dark brown, like the wood of the ceiling and the wood panels of the windows. "Let's talk," she said, sitting comfortably on the bed after taking off her sandals. She placed her knees against her naked breast. She looked like a young girl. Her aggressive and commanding manner had subdued and changed into charm. At that moment she was the antithesis of what she had been earlier. I had to laugh at the way she was urging me to write. She reminded me of Don Juan. "Now we have the time," she said. "The wind has changed. Didn't you notice?" I had. She said that the new direction of the wind was her own beneficial direction, and thus the wind had turned into her helper. "What do you know about the wind, Dona Soledad?" I asked, as I calmly sat down on the floor of her bed, on the foot of her bed. "Only when the Nawal taught me," she said. "Only what the Nawal taught me. Each one of us, women that is, has a peculiar direction, a particular wind. Men don't. I am the north wind. When it blows, I am different. The Nawal said that a warrior can use her particular wind for whatever she wants. I used it to trim my body and remake it. Look at me. I am the north wind. Feel me when I come through the window." There was a strong wind blowing through the window, which was strategically placed to face the north. "Why do you think men don't have a wind?" I asked. She thought for a moment and then replied that the Nawal had never mentioned why. "You wanted to know who made this floor?" she said, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. "I made it myself. It took me 4 years to put it down. Now this floor is like myself." As she spoke, I noticed the converging lines in the floor were orientated to originate from the north. The room, however, was not perfectly aligned with the cardinal points. Thus her bed was at odd angles with the walls, and so were the lines of the clay slabs. "Why did you make the floor red, Dona Soledad?" "That's my color. I am red, like red dirt. I got the red clay in the mountains around here. The Nawal told me where to look, and he also helped me carry it, and so did everyone else. They all helped me." "Where did you fire the clay?" "The Nawal made me dig a pit. We filled it with firewood, and then stacked up the clay slabs with flat pieces of rock in between them. I closed the pit with a lid of dirt and wire and set the wood on fire. It burned for days. How did you keep the slabs from warping? I didn't. The wind did that. The north wind that blew while the fire was on. The Nawal showed me how to dig the pit so it would face the north and the north wind. He also made me leave 4 holes for the north wind to blow into the pit. Then he made me leave 1 hole in the center of the lid to let the smoke out. The wind made the wood burn for days. After the pit was cold again, I opened it and began to polish and even out the slabs. It took me over a year to make enough slabs to finish the floor. How did you figure out the design? The wind taught me that. When I made the floor, the Nawal had already taught me not to resist the wind. He had showed me how to give in to my wind and let it guide me. It took me a long time to do that, years and years. I was very difficult, silly old woman at first. He told me that himself, and he was right. But I learned very fast, perhaps because I'm old and no longer have anything to lose. In the beginning, what made it even more difficult for me was the fear I had. The mere presence of the Nawal made me stutter and faint. The Nawal had the same effect on everyone else. I was his fate. It was his fate to be so fearsome. She stopped talking and stared at me. The Nawal is not human, she said. What makes you say that? The Nawal is a devil from who knows what time. Her statement chilled me. I felt my heart pounding. She certainly could not have found a better audience. I was intrigued to no end. I begged her to explain what she meant by that. His touch changed people, she said. You know that. He changed your body. In your case, you didn't even know that he was doing that. He got into your body. He put something in it. He did the same with me. He left something in me, and that something took over. Only a devil can do that. Now I am the north wind, and I fear nothing, and no one. But before he changed me, I was a weak, ugly old woman who would faint at the mere mention of his name. Pablito, of course, was no help to me because he feared the Nawal more than death itself. But one day the Nawal and Gennaro came to the house when I was alone. I heard them by the door like prowling jaguars. I crossed myself. To me, they were 2 demons. But I came out to see what I could do for them. They were hungry, and I gladly fixed some food for them. I had some thick bowls made out of gourd, and I gave each man a bowl of soup. The Nawal didn't seem to appreciate the food. He didn't want to eat the food prepared by such a weak woman, and pretended to be clumsy and knocked the bowl off the table with the sweep of his arm. But the bowl, instead of turning over and spilling all over the floor, slid with the force of the Nawal's blow and fell on my foot without spilling a drop. The bowl actually landed on my foot and stayed there until I bent over and picked it up. I set it up on the table in front of him and told him that even though I was a weak woman and had always feared him, my food had good feelings. From that moment that the Nawal changed toward me. The fact that the bowl of soup fell on my foot and didn't spill proved to him that power had pointed me out to him. I didn't know that at the time, and I thought he had changed toward me because he felt the shame of having refused my food. I thought nothing of his change. I still was petrified and couldn't even look him in the eye. He began to take more and more notice of me. He even brought me gifts, a shawl, a dress, a comb, and other things. That made me feel terrible. I was ashamed because I thought he was a man looking for a woman. The Nawal had young girls. What would he want with an old woman like me? At first I didn't want to wear or even consider looking at his gifts. But Pablito prevailed on me, and I began to wear them. I also began to be even more afraid of him and didn't want to be alone with him. I knew that he was a devilish man, and I knew what he had done to his woman. I felt compelled to interrupt her. I told her that I had never known of a woman in Don Juan's life. You know who I mean, she said. Believe me, Dona Soledad, I don't. Don't give me that. You know who I'm talking about. Lagorda. The only Lagorda I knew was Pablito's sister, an enormously fat girl nicknamed Gorda, Fatso. I had the feeling, although no one ever talked about it, that she was not really Dona Soledad's daughter. I did not want to press her for any more information. I suddenly remembered that the fat girl had disappeared from the house, and nobody could or dared to tell me what had happened to her. One day I was alone in front of the house Dona Soledad went on, and I was combing my hair in the sun with the comb that the Nawal had given me. I didn't realize that he had arrived and was standing behind me. All of a sudden I felt his hand grabbing me by the chin. I heard him say very softly that I shouldn't move because my neck might break. He twisted my head to the left, not all the way, but a bit. I became very frightened and screamed and tried to wriggle out of his grip, but he held my head firmly for a long, long time. When he let go of my chin, I fainted. I didn't remember what happened then. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground right where I had been sitting. The Nawal was gone. I was so ashamed that I didn't want to see anyone, especially Lagorda. For a long time, I even thought that the Nawal had never twisted my neck, and I had had a nightmare. She stopped. I waited for an explanation of what had happened. She seemed distracted, pensive perhaps. What exactly happened, Dona Soledad? I asked, incapable of containing myself. Did he do something to you? Yes, he twisted my neck in order to change the direction of my eyes, she said, and laughed loudly at me with a look of surprise. I mean, did he? Yes, he changed my direction, she went on, oblivious to my probes. He did that to you and to all the others. That's true. He did that to me. But why do you think he did that? He had to. That is the most important thing to do. She was referring to a peculiar act that Don Juan had deemed absolutely necessary. I had never talked about it to anyone. In fact, I had almost forgotten about it. At the beginning of my apprenticeship, he once built 2 small fires in the mountains of northern Mexico. They were perhaps 20 feet apart. He made me stand another 20 feet away from them, holding my body and especially my head in a most relaxed and natural position. He then made me face one fire. Coming from behind me, he twisted my neck to the left and aligned my eyes, but not my shoulders, with the other fire. He held my head in that position for hours until the fire was extinguished. The new direction was the southeast, or rather he had aligned the second fire in a southeasterly direction. I had understood the whole affair as one of Don Juan's inscrutable peculiarities, one of his nonsensical rights. The Nawal said that all of us throughout our lives develop one direction to look, she went on. That becomes the direction of the eyes of the spirit. Through the years that direction becomes overused and weak and unpleasant. And since we are bound to that particular direction, we become weak and unpleasant ourselves. The day the Nawal twisted my neck and held it until I fainted out of fear, he gave me a new direction. What direction did he give you? Why do you ask that, she said, with unnecessary force. Do you think that perhaps the Nawal gave me a different direction? I can tell you the direction that he gave me, I said. Never mind, she snapped. He told me that himself. She seemed agitated. She changed position and lay on her stomach. My back hurt from writing. I asked her if I could sit on the floor and use the bed as a table. She stood up and handed me the folded bedspread to use as a cushion. What else did the Nawal do to you, I asked. After changing my direction, the Nawal really began to talk to me about power, she said, lying down again. He mentioned things in a casual way at first, because he didn't know exactly what to do with me. One day he took me for a short walking trip in the Sierras. Then another day he took me on a bus to his homeland in the desert. Little by little I became accustomed to going away with him. Did he ever give you power plants? He gave me mescalito once when we were in the desert, but since I was an empty woman, mescalito refused me. I had a horrid encounter with him. It was then that the Nawal knew that he ought to acquaint me with the wind instead. That was, of course, after he got an omen. He had said over and over that day that although he was a sorcerer, he had learned to see. If he didn't get an omen, he had no way of knowing which way to go. He had already waited for days for a certain indication about me, but power didn't want to give it. In desperation, I suppose, he introduced me to his guage, 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 that's how I'm saying it, and I saw a mescalito. I interrupted her. Her use of the word gourd, I guess guaje means gourd, was confusing to me. Examined in the context of what she was telling me, the word had no meaning. I thought that perhaps she was speaking metaphorically, or that the gourd was a euphemism. What is a gaje, Dona Soledad? There was a look of surprise in her eyes. She paused before answering. Mescalito is the Nawal's gaje, she finally said. Her answer was even more confusing. I felt mortified by the fact that she really seemed concerned with making sense to me. When I asked her to explain further, she insisted that I knew everything myself. That was Don Juan's favorite stratagem, to foil my probes. I said to her that Don Juan had told me that Mescalito was a deity, or a force contained in the peyote buttons. To say that Mescalito was his gourd made absolutely no sense. The Nawal can acquaint you with anything through his gourd, she said after a pause. That is the key to his power. Anyone can give you peyote, but only a sorcerer, through his gourd, can acquaint you with Mescalito. She stopped talking and fixed her eyes on me. Her look was ferocious. Why do you have to make me repeat what you already know? She asked in an angry tone. I was completely taken aback by her sudden shift. A moment before she had been almost sweet. Never mind my changes of mood, she said, smiling again. I am the north wind. I am very impatient. All my life I have never dared to speak my mind. Now I fear no one. I say what I feel. To meet with me, you have to be strong. She slid closer to me on her stomach. Well, the Nawal acquainted me with Mescalito that came out of his gourd, she went on, but I couldn't guess what would happen to me. He expected something like your own meeting or Eligio's meeting with Mescalito. In both cases, he was at a loss and let his gourd decide what to do next. In both cases, his gourd helped him. With me, it was different. Mescalito told him never to bring me around. The Nawal and I left that place in a great hurry. We went north instead of coming home. We took a bus to go to Mexicali, but we got out in the middle of the desert. It was very late. The sun was setting behind the mountains. The Nawal wanted to cross the road and go south on foot. We were waiting for some speeding cars to go by when suddenly he tapped my shoulder and pointed to the road ahead of us. I saw a spiral of dust. A gust of wind was raising dust on the side of the road. He watched it move toward us. The Nawal ran across the road, and the wind enveloped me. It actually made me spin very gently, then it vanished. That was the omen the Nawal was waiting for. From then on, we went to the mountains or the desert for the purpose of seeking the wind. The wind didn't like me at first because I was my old self, so the Nawal endeavored to change me. He first made me build this room and this floor. Then he made me wear new clothes and sleep on a mattress instead of a straw mat. He made me wear shoes and have drawers full of clothes. He forced me to walk hundreds of miles and taught me to be quiet. I learned very fast. He also made me do strange things for no reason at all. One day while we were in the mountains of his homeland, I listened to the wind for the first time. It came directly to my womb. I was lying on top of a flat rock, and the wind twirled around me. I had already seen it that day, whirling around the bushes, but this time it came over me and stopped. I felt like a bird that landed on my stomach. The Nawal had made me take off all my clothes. I was stark naked, but I was not cold because the wind was warming me up. Were you afraid, Dona Soledad? Afraid? I was petrified. The wind was alive. It licked me from head to my toes, and then it got inside my whole body. I was like a balloon, and the wind came out of my ears, out of my mouth, and other parts I don't want to mention. I thought I was going to die. I would have run away had it not been that the Nawal held me to the rock. He spoke to me in my ear and calmed me down. I lay quietly and let the wind do whatever it wanted with me. It was then that it told me what to do. What to do, what to do with what? With my life, my things, my room, my feelings. It was not clear at first. I thought it was me thinking. The Nawal said that all of us do that. When we are quiet, though, we realize that it is something else telling us things. Did you hear a voice? No, the wind moves inside the body of a woman. The now, is that the right page here? Inside the body of a woman. Huh? All right. The Nawal says that it is so because women have wombs. Once it is inside the womb, the wind simply picks you up and tells you to do things. The more quiet and relaxed the woman is, the better the results. You may say that all of a sudden the woman finds herself doing things that she had no idea how to do. From that day on, the wind came to me all the time. It spoke to me in my womb and told me everything I wanted to know. The Nawal saw from the beginning that I was the north wind. The other winds never spoke to me like that, although I had learned to distinguish them. How many kinds of winds are there? There are 4 kinds of winds, like there are 4 directions. That's of course for sorcerers, and for whatever sorcerers do. 4 is a power number for them. The first wind is the breeze, the morning. It brings hope and brightness. It is the herald of the day. It comes and goes and gets into everything. Sometimes it's mild and unnoticeable, and other times it's nagging and bothersome. Another wind is the hard wind, either hot or cold or both, a midday wind, blasting, full of energy, but also full of blindness. It breaks through doors and brings down walls. A sorcerer must be terribly strong to tackle the hard wind. Then there is the cold wind of the afternoon, sad and trying, a wind that would never leave you in peace. It will chill you and make you cry. The Nawal said that there is such depth to it, though, that it is more than worthwhile to seek it. And at last there is the hot wind. It warms and protects and envelops everything. It is a night wind for sorcerers. Its power goes together with the darkness. Those are the 4 winds. They are also associated with the 4 directions. The breeze is the east, the cold wind is the west, the hot one is the south, the hard wind is the north. The 4 winds also have personalities. The breeze is gay and sleek and shifty. The cold wind is moody and melancholy and always pensive. The hot wind is happy and abandoned and bouncy. The hard wind is energetic, commandeering, and impatient. The Nawal told me that the 4 winds are women. That is why female warriors seek them. Winds and women are alike. That is also the reason why women are better than men. I would say that women learn faster if they cling to their specific wind. How can a woman know what her specific wind is? If a woman quiets down, it is not talking to herself. Her wind will pick her up, just like that. She made a gesture of grabbing. Does she have to lie naked? That helps, especially if she is shy. I was a fat old woman. I had never taken my clothes off in my life. I slept in them. When I took a bath, I always had my slip on. For me to show my fat body to the wind was like dying. The Nawal knew that and played it for all it was worth. He knew of my friendship of women in the wind. Of the friendship of women in the wind. He introduced me to Mescalito because he was baffled by me. After turning my head that first day, the Nawal found himself with me on his hands. He told me that he had no idea what to do with me, but one thing was for sure. He didn't want a fat old woman snooping around his world. The Nawal said that he felt about me the way he felt about you, baffled. Both of us shouldn't be there. You were not an Indian, and I'm an old cow. We are both useless, if you come right down to it. And look at us. Something must have happened. A woman, of course, is much more supple than a man. A woman changes easily with the power of a sorcerer, especially with the power of a sorcerer like the Nawal. A male apprentice, according to the Nawal, is extremely difficult. For example, you yourself haven't changed as much as Lagorda. and she started her apprenticeship way after you did. A woman is softer and more gentle, and above all, a woman is like a gourd. She receives, but somehow man commands more power. The Nawal never agreed with that, though. He believed that women are the unequal tops. He also believed that I felt men were better only because I am an empty woman. He also believed that I felt men were only better because I was an empty woman. Okay. He must be right. I have been empty for so long that I can't remember what it feels like to be complete. The Nawal said that if I ever became complete, I will change my feelings about it. But if he was right, his daughter would have done as well as Eligio, and as you know, she hasn't. I could not follow the flow of her narrative because her unstated assumption that I knew what she was referring to. In this case, I had no idea what Eligio or Lagorda had done. In what way was Lagorda different than Eligio? She looked at me for a moment as if measuring something in me. Then she sat up with her knees against her chest. The Nawal told me everything, she said briskly. The Nawal had no secrets from me. Eligio was the best. That's why he is not in the world now. He didn't return. In fact, he was so good that he didn't have to jump from a precipice when his apprenticeship was over. He was like Gennaro. One day while he was working in the fields, something came to him and took him away. He knew how to let go. I felt like asking her if I had really jumped into an abyss. I deliberated for a moment before going ahead with my question. After all, I had come to see Pablito and Nesta to clarify that point. Any information I could get on the topic from anyone involved in Don Juan's world was indeed a bonus to me. She laughed at my question as I had anticipated. You mean you don't know what you yourself did? She asked. It was too far-fetched to be real, I said. That is the Nawal's world for sure. Not a thing in it is real. He himself told me not to believe anything. But still, the male apprentices have to jump, unless you are truly magnificent, like Eligio. The Nawal took us, me and Lagorda, to that mountain and made us look down to the bottom of it. There he showed us the kind of flying Nawal he was. But only Lagorda could follow him. She also wanted to jump into the abyss. The Nawal told her that that was useless. He said female warriors have to do things more painful and more difficult than that. He also told us that the jump was only for the four of you, and that is what happened. The four of you jumped. She had said that the four of us had jumped, but I only knew of Pablito and myself having done that. In light of her statement, I figured that Don Juan and Don Gennaro must have followed us. That did not seem odd to me. It was rather pleasing and touching. What are you talking about? She asked after I had voiced my thoughts. I meant you and the three apprentices of Gennaro. You, Pablito, and Nesta jumped on the same day. Who is the other apprentice of Gennaro? I only know Pablito and Nesta. You mean you don't know that? I don't know if I say this right. Benigno. I call him Benigno. Benigno. That's it. Benigno. You mean you didn't know that Benigno was Gennaro's apprentice? No, I didn't. He was Gennaro's oldest apprentice. He jumped before you did, and he jumped by himself. Benigno was one of the 5 Indian youths I had once found while roaming in the Sonoran Desert with Don Juan. They were in search of power objects. Don Juan told me that all of them were apprentices of sorcery. I struck up a peculiar friendship with Benigno in the few times I had seen him after that. He was from southern Mexico. I liked him very much. For some unknown reason, he seemed to delight himself by creating a tantalizing mystery about his personal life. I could never find out who he was or what he had did. Every time I talked to him, he baffled me with disarming candor with which he evaded my probes. Once Don Juan volunteered some information about Benigno and said that he was very fortunate in having found a teacher and a benefactor. I took Don Juan's statements as casual remarks that meant nothing. Dona Soledad had clarified a 10-year-old mystery for me. Why do you think Don Juan never told me anything about Benigno? Who knows? He must have had a reason. The Nawal never did anything thoughtlessly. I had to prop my aching back against her bed before resuming writing. Whatever happened to Benigno? He's doing fine. He's perhaps better off than anyone else. You will see him. He's with Pablito and Nesta. Right now they are inseparable. Gennaro's brand is on them. The same thing happened to the girls. They're inseparable because the Nawal's brand is on them. I had to interrupt her again and ask her to explain what girls she was talking about. My girls, she said. Your daughters, you mean Pablito's sisters? They are not Pablito's sisters. They are the Nawal's apprentices. Her disclosure shocked me. Ever since I had met Pablito years ago, I had been led to believe that the 4 girls who lived in his house were his sisters. Don Juan himself had told me so. I had a sudden relapse of feeling of despair. I had experienced all afternoon. Dona Soledad was not to be trusted. She was engineering something. I was sure that Don Juan could not under any conditions have misled me so grossly. Dona Soledad examined me with overt curiosity. The wind just told me that you don't believe what I'm telling you, she said and laughed. The wind is right, I said dryly. The girls that you've seen over the years are the Nawals. They were his apprentices. Now that the Nawal is gone, they are the Nawal himself. But they are also my girls, mine. You mean that you're not Pablito's mother and that they are really your daughters? I mean that they are mine. The Nawal gave them to me for safekeeping. You are always wrong because you rely on words to explain everything. Since I am Pablito's mother, and you heard that they were my girls, you figured that they must be brother and sisters. The girls are my true babies. Pablito, although he is the child that came out of my womb, is my mortal enemy. My reaction to her statements was a mixture of revulsion and anger. I thought that she was not only an aberrated woman, but a dangerous one. Somehow part of me had known that since the moment I had arrived. She watched me for a long time. To avoid looking at her, I sat down on the bedspread again. The Nawal warned me about your weirdness, she said suddenly. But I couldn't understand what he meant. Now I know. He told me to be careful and not to anger you because you're violent. I'm sorry I was not as careful as I should have been. But I also said that as long as you can, he also said that as long as you can write, you could go through hell itself and not even feel it. I haven't bothered you about that. Then he told me that you're suspicious because words entangle you. I haven't bothered you there either. I've been talking my head off, not trying to entangle you. There was a silent accusation in her tone. I felt somehow embarrassed at being annoyed with her. What you're telling me is very difficult to believe, I said. Either you or Don Juan has lied to me terribly. Neither of us has lied to you. You understand only what you want to. The Nawal said that is a condition of your emptiness. The girls are the Nawal's children, just like you and Eligio are his children. He made 6 children, 4 women and 2 men. Gennaro made 3. There are 9 altogether. One of them, Eligio, already made it. So now it is up to the 8 of you to try. Where did Eligio go? He went to join the Nawal and Gennaro. And where did the Nawal and Gennaro go? You know where they went. You're just kidding me, aren't you? But that's the point, Dona Soledad. I'm not kidding you. Then I will tell you. I can't deny you anything. The Nawal and Gennaro went back to the same place they came from, to the other world. When their time was up, they simply stepped out into the darkness out there, and since they did not want to come back, the darkness of the night swallowed them up. I felt it was useless to probe her any further. I was ready to change the subject, but then she spoke. You caught a glimpse of the other world when you jumped, she went on. But maybe the jump has confused you. Too bad. There is nothing that anyone can do about it. If your fate it is your fate to be a man. Women are better than men in that sense. They don't have to jump into an abyss. Women had their own ways. They had their own abyss. Women menstruate. The Nawal told me that that was the door for them. During their period, they become something else. I know that was the time when he taught my girls. The Nawal told me that was the door for him. That was the door for them. During their period, they become something else. I know that was the time when he taught my girls. It was too late for me. I was too old, so I really don't know what the door looks like. But the Nawal insisted that the girls pay attention to everything that happens to them during that time. He would take them during those days into the mountains and stay with them until till they could see the crack between the worlds. The Nawal, since he had no qualms or fears about doing anything, pushed them without mercy so they could find out for themselves that there is a crack in women, a crack that they disguise very well. During their period, no matter how well made the disguise is, it falls away and women are bare. The Nawal pushed my girls until they were half dead to open that crack. They did it. He made them do it, but it took them years. How did they become apprentices? Lydia was the first apprentice. He found her one morning when he had stopped at a disheveled hut in the mountains. The Nawal told me that there was no one in sight, and yet there had been omens calling him to that house since early morning. The breeze had bothered him terribly. He said that he couldn't even open his eyes every time he tried to walk away from that area. So when he found the house, he knew that something was there. He looked under a pile of straw and twigs and found the girl. She was very ill. She could hardly talk, but she told him that she didn't need anyone's help. She was going to keep on sleeping there, and if she didn't wake up anymore, no one would lose a thing. The Nawal liked her spirit and talked to her in her language. He told her that he was going to cure her and take care of her until she was strong again. She refused. She was an Indian who had known only hardship and pain. She told the Nawal that she had already taken all the medicine that her parents had given her, and nothing helped. The more she talked, the more the Nawal understood that the omen had pointed her out to him in a most peculiar way. The omen was more like a command. The Nawal picked the girl up and put her on his shoulders like a child and brought her to Gennaro's place. Gennaro made medicine for her. She couldn't open her eyes anymore. The lids were stuck together. They were swollen and had a yellowish crud on them. They were festering. The Nawal tended her until she was well. He hired me to look after her and cook her meals. I helped to get her well with my food. She is my first baby. When she was well, and that took nearly a year, the Nawal wanted to return her to her parents, but the girl refused to go and went with him instead. A short time after that, he found Lydia, while she was still sick and in my care, and the Nawal found you. We were brought to him by a man. You were brought to him by a man he had never seen before in his life. The Nawal saw that the man's death was hovering above his head, and found it very odd that the man would point you out to him at such a time. You made the Nawal laugh right away, and the Nawal set a test for you. He didn't take you. He told you to come and find him. He has tested you ever since like he has tested no one else. He said that was your path. For years, he had only two apprentices, Lydia and you. Then one day, while he was visiting his friend Vincente, a curer from the north, some people brought in a crazy girl, a girl who did nothing else but cry. The people took the Nawal for Vincente and placed the girl in his hands. The Nawal told me that the girl ran to him and clung to him as if she knew him. The Nawal told her parents that they had to leave her with him. They were worried about the cost, but the Nawal assured them that it would be free. I suppose that the girl was such a pain in the ass to them that they didn't mind getting rid of her. The Nawal brought her to me. That was hell. She was truly crazy. That was Josephina. It took the Nawal years to cure her, but even to this day, she's crazier than a bat. She was, of course, crazy about the Nawal, and there was a terrible fight between Lydia and Josephina. They hated each other, but I liked them both. But the Nawal, when he saw that they couldn't get along, became very firm with them. As you know, the Nawal can't get mad at anyone, so he scared them half to death. One day Lydia got mad and left. She had decided to find herself a young husband. On the road, she found a tiny chicken. It had just been hatched and was lost in the middle of the road. Lydia picked it up, and since she was in a deserted area with no houses around, she figured that the chicken belonged to no one. She put it inside her blouse, in between her breasts to keep it warm. Lydia told me that she ran, and in doing so, the little chicken began to move around her side. She began to bring him back to the front of her, up to her front, but she couldn't catch him. The chicken ran very fast around her sides and her back, inside her blouse. The chicken's feet tickled her first, then they drove her crazy. When she realized that she couldn't get him out, she came back to me, screaming out of her mind, and told me to get the damn thing out of her blouse. I undressed her, but that was to no avail. There was no chicken at all, and yet she still felt its feet on her skin going around and around. The Nawal came over then and told her that only when she let go of her old self would the chicken stop running. Lydia was crazy for 3 days and 3 nights, and the Nawal told me to tie her up. I fed her and cleaned her and gave her water. On the 4th day, she became very peaceful and calm. I untied her, and she put on her clothes, and when she was dressed again, as she had been the day she ran, when she was dressed again as she had been the day she ran away, the little chicken came out. She took him in her hand and petted him and thanked him and returned him to the place where she had found him. I walked with her part of the way. From that time on, Lydia never bothered anyone. She accepted her fate. The Nawal was her fate. Without him, she would have been dead. So what was the point of trying to refuse or mold things which can only be accepted? Josephina went off next. She was already afraid of what happened to Lydia, but soon forgot about it. One Sunday afternoon, when she was coming back to the house, a dry leaf got stuck in the threads of her shawl. Her shawl was loosely woven. She tried to pick out the small leaf, but she was afraid of ruining her shawl. So when she came into the house, she immediately tried to loosen it, but there was no way. It was stuck. Josephina, in a fit of anger, clutched the shawl and the leaf and crumbled it inside her hand. She figured that the small pieces would be easy to pick out. I heard a maddening scream, and Josephina fell to the ground. I ran to her and found that she couldn't open her hand. The leaf had cut her hand to shreds, as if it were pieces of a razor blade. Lydia and I helped her and nursed her for 7 days. Josephina was more stubborn than anyone else. She nearly died. At the end, she managed to open her hand, but only after she had, in her own mind, resolved to drop her old ways. She still gets pains in her body from time to time, especially in her hands, due to the ugly disposition that still returns to her. The Nawal told both of them that they shouldn't count on their victory because it is a lifetime struggle that each of us wages against our old selves. Ain't that the truth? Lydia and Josephina never fought again. I don't think they like each other, but they certainly get along. I love those two the most. They have been with me all these years. I know that they love me too. What about the other 2 girls? Where do they fit? A year later, Elena came. She is LaGorda. She was by far in the worst condition you could imagine. She weighed over 220 pounds. She was a desperate woman. Pablito gave her shelter in his shop. She did laundry and ironing to support herself. The Nawal came one night to get Pablito and found the fat girl working while a circle of moths flew over her head. He said that the moss made such a perfect circle for him to watch, that he saw that the woman was near the end of her life. Yet the moths must have had all the confidence in the world in order for them to give him such an omen. The Nawal acted fast and took her with him. She did fine for a while, but bad habits that she had learned were too deep and she couldn't give them up. One day the Nawal sent the wind to help her. It was a matter of helping her or finishing her off. The wind began to blow on her until it drove her out of the house. She was alone that day, and no one saw what was happening. The wind pushed her over hills and into ravines until she fell into a ditch, a hole in the ground like a grave. The wind kept her there for days. When the Nawal finally found her, she had managed to stop the wind, but she was too weak to walk. How did the girls manage to stop whatever was acting upon them? Well, in the first place, what was acting upon them was the gourd that the Nawal carried, tied to his belt. And what is in the gourd? The allies the Nawal carries with him. He said that the ally is funneled through his gourd. Don't ask me any more because I don't know anything more about the ally. All I can tell you is that the Nawal commands two allies and makes them help him. In the case of my girls, the ally actually backed down when they were ready to change. For them, of course, it was a case of either change or death. But that's the case with all of us, one way or another. And Lagorda changed more than anyone else. She was empty, in fact more empty than I am. But she worked her spirit until it became power itself. I don't like her. I'm afraid of her. She knows me. She gets inside me and my feelings, and that bothers me. But no one can do anything to her because she never lets her guard down. She doesn't hate me, but she thinks I'm an evil woman. She may be right. I think that she knows me too well, and I'm not as impeccable as I want to be. But the Nawal told me not to worry about my feelings toward her. She is like Eligio. The world no longer touches her. What did the Nawal do to her that was so special? He taught her things that he never taught anyone else. He never pampered her or anything like that. He trusted her. She knows everything about everybody. Why am I here? She knows everything about everybody. The Nawal told me everything except things about her. Maybe that's why I don't like her. The Nawal told her to be my jailer. Wherever I go, I find her. She knows whatever I do. Right now, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if she shows up. Do you think she would? I doubt it. Tonight the wind is with me. Okay. What is she supposed to do? Does she have a special task? I've told you enough about her. I'm afraid that if I keep on talking about her, she will notice me from wherever she is, and I don't want that to happen. Tell me then about the others. Some years ago, after he found Lagorda, the Nawal found Eligio. He told me that he had gone with you to his homeland. Eligio came to see you because he was curious about you. The Nawal didn't notice him. He had known him since he was a kid. But one morning, as the Nawal walked into the house where you were waiting for him, he bumped into Eligio on the road. They walked together for a short distance. Then a dried piece of cholla got stuck on the tip of Eligio's left shoe. He tried to kick it loose, but its thorns were like nails. They had gone deep into the sole of the shoe. The Nawal said that Eligio pointed up to the sky with his finger and shook his foot, and the cholla came off like a bullet and went up into the air. Eligio thought it was a big joke and laughed, but the Nawal knew that he had power, and although Eligio himself didn't even suspect it. That is why, with no trouble at all, he became the perfect, impeccable warrior. It was my good fortune that I got to know him. The Nawal told me that both of us were alike in one thing. Once we hook onto something, we don't let go of it. The good fortune of knowing Eligio was a fortune that I shared with no one else, not even Lagorda. She met Eligio but didn't really get to know him, just like yourself. The Nawal knew from the beginning that Eligio was exceptional, and he isolated him. He knew that you and the girls were on one side of the coin, and Eligio was by himself on the other. But Nawal and Gennaro were indeed very fortunate to have found him. I first met him when the Nawal brought me over to his house. Eligio didn't get along with my girls. They hated him and feared him too. But he was thoroughly indifferent. The world didn't touch him. The Nawal didn't want you in particular to have much to do with Eligio. The Nawal said that you are the kind of sorcerer one should stay away from. He said that your touch doesn't soothe, it spoils instead. He told me that your spirit takes prisoners. He was somehow revolted by you, and at the same time he liked you. He said that you were crazier than Josephina when he found you, and that you still are. I was unsettled. It was unsettling. It was it was an unsettling feeling to hear someone else telling me what Josephina thought of me, what Don Juan thought of me. At first I tried to disregard what Dona Soledad was saying, but then I felt utterly stupid and out of place, trying to protect my ego. He bothered with you, she went on, because he was commanded by power to do so. And he, being an impeccable warrior he was, yielded to his master, and gladly did what power told him to do with you. There was a pause. I was aching to ask her more about Don Juan's feelings about me. I asked her to tell me about her other girls instead. A month after I found Eligio, the Nawal found Rosa, she said. Rosa was the last one. Once he found her, he knew that his number was complete. How did he find her? He had gone to see Benigno in his homeland. He was approaching the house when Rosa came out from the thick bushes on the side of the road, chasing a pig that had gotten loose and was running away. The pig ran too fast for Rosa. She bumped into the Nawal and couldn't catch up with the pig. She then turned against the Nawal and began to yell at him. He made a gesture to grab her, and she was ready to fight him. She insulted him and dared him to lay a hand on her. The Nawal liked her spirit immediately, and there was no omen. The Nawal said that he waited for a moment before walking away, and then the pig came running back and stood beside him. That was his omen. Rosa put a rope around the pig. The Nawal asked her point blank if she was happy with her job. She said no. She was a live-in servant. The Nawal asked her if she would go with him, and she said that if it was what she thought it was for, the answer was no. The Nawal said it was for work, and she wanted to know how much he would pay. He gave her a figure, and then she asked what kind of work it was. The Nawal said it was work with him in the tobacco fields of Veracruz. She told him that she had been testing him. If he would have said he wanted her to work as a maid, she would have known that he was a liar, because he looked like someone who had never had a home in his life. The Nawal was delighted with her and told her that if she wanted to get out of the trap she was in, she should come to Benigno's house before noon. He also told her that he would wait no longer than 12. If she came, and she had to be prepared for a difficult life and plenty of work. She asked him how far was the place of the tobacco fields. Don Juan said 3 days' ride in a bus. Rosa said that if it was that far, she would certainly be ready to go as soon as she got the pig back in his pen. And she did just that. She came here and everyone liked her. She was never mean or bothersome. The Nawal did not have to force her or trick her into anything. She doesn't like me at all. And yet she takes care of me better than anyone else. I trust her, and yet I don't like her at all. And when I leave, I will miss her the most. Can you beat that? I saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. I could not sustain my distrust. She wiped her eyes with a casual movement of her hand. There was a natural break in the conversation at that point. It was getting dark by then, and writing was very difficult. Besides, I had to go to the bathroom. She insisted that I use the outhouse before she did, as the Nawal himself would have done. Afterwards, she brought 2 round tubs the size of a child's bathtub, filled them half full of warm water, and added some green leaves after mashing them thoroughly with her hands. She told me with an authoritative tone to wash myself in one of the tubs while she did the same in the other. The water had an almost perfume smell. It caused a ticklish sensation. I felt like mild menthol on my face and arms. We went back to her room. She put my writing gear where I had left it on her bed, on top of her chest of drawers. The windows were open, and there was still light. It must have been close to 7. Dona Soledad lay on her back. She was smiling at me. I thought she was the picture of warmth. But at the same time, and in spite of her smile, her eyes gave out a feeling of ruthlessness and unbending intent. I asked her how long she had been with Don Juan as his woman or apprentice. She made fun of my cautiousness in labeling her. Her answer was 7 years. She reminded me then that I had not seen her for 5, and I had been convinced up to that point that I had seen her 2 years before. I tried to remember the last time, but I could not. She told me to lie down next to her. I knelt on the bed by her side. In a soft voice, she asked me if I was afraid. I said no, which was the truth. Then, in her room, at that moment, I was being confronted by an old response of mine, which had manifested itself countless times, a mixture of curiosity and suicidal indifference. Almost in a whisper, she said that she had to be impeccable with me and tell me that our meeting was crucial for both of us. She said that the Nawal had given her direct and detailed orders of what to do. As she talked, I could not help laughing at her tremendous effort to sound like Don Juan. I listened to her statements and could not predict what she would say next. Suddenly she sat up. Her face was a few inches from mine. I could see her white teeth shining in the semi-darkness of the room. She put her arms around me in an embrace and pulled me on top of her. My mind was very clear, and yet something was leading me deeper and deeper into a sort of morass. I was experiencing myself as something I had no conception of. Suddenly I knew that I had somehow been feeling her feelings all along. She was the strange one. She had mesmerized me with her words. She was a cold old woman, and her designs were not those of youth and vigor, in spite of her vitality and strength. I knew then that Don Juan had not turned her head in the same direction as mine. That thought would have been ridiculous in any other context. Nonetheless, at that moment, I took it as a true insight. A feeling of alarm swept through my body. I wanted to get out of her bed, but there seemed to be an extraordinary force around me that kept me fixed, incapable of moving away. I was paralyzed. She must have felt my realization. All of a sudden, she pulled the band that tied her hair, and in one swift movement, she wrapped it around my neck. I felt the tension of the band on my skin, but somehow it did not seem real. Don Juan had always said to me that our great enemy is the fact that we never believe what is happening to us. At that moment, Dona Soledad was wrapping the cloth-like noose around my throat. I knew what he meant. But even after I had had that intellectual reflection, my body did not react. I remained flaccid, almost indifferent to what seemed to be my death. I felt an exertion of her arms and shoulders as she tightened the band around my neck. She was choking me with a great force and expertise. I began to gasp. Her eyes stared at me with a maddening glare. I knew then that she intended to kill me. Don Juan had said that when we finally realize that what is going on, it is usually too late to turn back. He contended that it is always the intellect that fools us, because it receives the message first, but rather than giving it credence and acting upon it immediately, it dallies with it instead. I heard then, or perhaps I felt, a snapping sound at the base of my neck, right behind my windpipe. I knew that she had cracked my neck. My ears buzzed, and then they tingled. I experienced an exceptional clarity of hearing. I thought that I must be dying. I loathed my incapacity to do anything to defend myself. I could not even move a muscle to kick her. I wasn't able to breathe anymore. My body shivered, and suddenly I stood up and was free, out of her deadly grip. I looked down on the bed. I seemed to be looking down from the ceiling. I saw my body motionless and limp on top of hers. I saw horror in her eyes. I wanted her to let go of the noose. I had a fit of wrath for having been so stupid, and hit her smack on the forehead with my fist. She shrieked and held her head and then passed out. But before she did, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a phantasmagoric scene. I saw Dona Soledad being hurled out of the bed by the force of my blow. I saw her running toward the wall and huddling up against it like a frightened child. The next impression I had was of having a terrible difficulty of breathing. My neck hurt. My throat seemed to have dried up so intensely that I could not swallow. It took me a long time to gather enough strength to get up. I then examined Dona Soledad. She was lying unconscious on the bed. She had an enormous red lump on her forehead. I got some water and splashed it on her face, the way Don Juan had always done for me. Then she regained consciousness. I made her walk, holding her by her armpits. She was soaked in perspiration. I applied towels with cold water on her forehead. She threw up, and I was almost sure she had a concussion. She was shivering. I tried to pile clothes and blankets over her for warmth, but she took off all her clothes and turned her body to face the wind. She asked me to leave her alone and said that if the wind changed direction, it would be a sign that she was going to get well. She held my hand in a sort of brief handshake and told me that it was fate that had pitted us against each other. I think one of us was supposed to die tonight, she said. Don't be silly, you're not finished, I said, and really meant it. Something made me feel confident that she was all right. I went outside, picked up a stick, and walked to my car. The dog growled. He was still curled up on the seat. I told him to get out. He meekly jumped out. There was something different about him. I saw his enormous shape trotting away in the semi-darkness. He went to his corral. I was free. I sat in the car for a moment to deliberate. No, I was not free. Something was pulling me back into the house. I had unfinished business there. I was no longer afraid of Dona Soledad. In fact, an extraordinary indifference had taken possession of me. I felt that she had given me, deliberately or unconsciously, a supremely important lesson. Under the horrendous pressure of her attempt to kill me, I had actually acted upon her from a level that would have been inconceivable under normal circumstances. I had nearly been strangled. Something in that confounded womb of hers had rendered me helpless, and yet I had extricated myself. I cannot imagine what had happened. Perhaps it was, as Don Juan had always maintained, that all of us have an extra potential, something which is there but rarely gets used. I had actually hit Dona Soledad from a phantom position. I took my flashlight from the car, went back into the house, lit all the kerosene lanterns I could find, and sat down at the table in the front room to write. Working relaxed me. Poor Dona Soledad stumbled out of her room. She could hardly keep her balance. She was completely naked. She became ill and collapsed by the door. I gave her some water and tried to cover her with a blanket. She refused it. I became concerned with the possibility of her losing body heat. She muttered that she had to be naked if she expected the wind to cure her. She made a plaster of mashed leaves, applied it to her forehead, and fixed it in place with her turban. She wrapped a blanket around her body and came to the table where I was writing and sat down facing me. Her eyes were red. She looked truly sick. There's something I must tell you, she said in a weak voice. The Nawal set me up to wait for you. I had to wait even if it took 20 years. He gave me instructions on how to entice you and to steal your power. He knew that sooner or later you had to come to see Pablito and Nesta. So he told me to use the opportunity to bewitch you and take everything you have. The Nawal said that if I lived an impeccable life, my power would bring you here, and there would be no one else in the house. My power did that. Today you came when everybody was gone. My impeccable life had helped me. All that was left for me to do was to take your power and then kill you. But why would you want to do such a horrible thing? Because I need your power for my own journey. The Nawal had set it up that way. You had to be the one. After all, I really didn't know you. You mean nothing to me. So why shouldn't I take something I need so desperately from someone who doesn't count at all? Those were the Nawal's very words. Why would the Nawal want you to hurt me? You yourself said he worried about me. What I've done to you tonight has nothing to do with what he feels about you or myself. This is only between the two of us. There have been no witnesses to what took place today between the two of us, because the both of us are part of the Nawal himself. But you in particular have received and kept something of him that I don't have, something I need desperately, the special power that he gave to you. The Nawal said that he had given something to each of his 6 children. I can't reach Eligio. I can't take it from my girls, so that leaves you as my prey. I made the power the Nawal gave me grow, and in growing it, it changed my body. You made your power grow too. I wanted that power from you, and for that I had to kill you. The Nawal said that even if you didn't die, you would fall under my spell and become my prisoner for life, if I wanted it so. Either way, your power was going to be mine. But how could my death benefit you? Not your death, but your power. I did it because I needed a boost. Without it, I will have a hellish time on my journey. I don't have enough guts. That's why I dislike Lagorda. She's young and has plenty of guts. I'm old and have second thoughts and doubts. If you want to know the truth, the real struggle is between Pablito and myself. He is my mortal enemy, not you. The Nawal said that your power could make my journey easier and help me get what I needed. How on earth can Pablito be your enemy? When the Nawal changed me, he knew what would eventually happen. First of all, he set me up so my eyes would face the north. And although you and my girls are the same, I am the opposite of you people. I go in a different direction. Pablito, Nesta, and Benicio are with you. The direction of their eyes is the same as yours. All of you will go together toward the Yucatan. Pablito is my enemy, not because his eyes were set in the opposite direction, but because he is my son. This is what I had to tell you, even though you didn't know what I am talking about. I have to enter into the other world, where the Nawal is now, where Gennaro and Eligio are, even if I have to destroy Pablito to do that. What are you saying, Dona Soledad? You're crazy. No, I'm not. There is nothing more important for us living beings than to enter into that world. I will tell you that for me, that is true. To get to that world, I will live the way the Nawal taught me. Without the hope of that world, I am nothing. Nothing. I was a fat old cow. Now that hope gives me a guide, a direction. And even if I can't take your power, I still have my purpose. She rested her head on the table, using her arms as a pillow. The force of her statements had numbed me. I did not understand what exactly she had meant, but I could almost empathize with her plea, although it was the strangest thing I had ever heard from her that night. Her purpose was a warrior's purpose, in Don Juan's style of terminology. I never knew, however, that one had to destroy people in order to fulfill it. She lifted up her head and looked at me with half-closed eyes. At the beginning, everything worked fine for me today. I was a bit scared when you drove up. I had waited years for that moment. The Nawal told me that you like women. He said that you are an easy prey for them. So I played you for a quick finish. I figured that you would go for it. The Nawal had taught me how I should grab you at the moment when you are the weakest. I was leading you to that moment with my body, but you became suspicious. I was too clumsy. I had taken you to my room as the Nawal had told me to do, so the lines of my floor would entrap you and make you helpless. But you fooled my floor by liking it and by watching the lines intently. It had no power as long as your eyes were on its lines. Your body knew what to do. Then you scared my floor, yelling the way you did. Sudden noises like that are deadly, especially the voice of a sorcerer. The power of my floor died out like a flame. I knew it, but you didn't. You were about to leave then, so I had to stop you. The Nawal had shown me how to use my hand to grab you. I tried to do that, but my power was low. My floor was skid. Your eyes had numbed its lines. No one else has ever laid eyes on them, so I failed in my attempt to grab your neck. You got out of my grip before I had time to squeeze you. I knew then that you were slipping away and I had one final attack. I used the key the Nawal said would affect you the most, fright. I frightened you with my shrieks, and that gave me enough power to subdue you. I thought I had you, but my stupid dog got excited. He's stupid, and he knocked me off of you when I had you almost under my spell. As I see it now, perhaps my dog was not so stupid after all. Maybe he noticed your double and charged against it, but knocked me over instead. You said it wasn't your dog. I lied. He was my trump card. The Nawal taught me that I should always have a trump card, an unusual, unexpected trick. Someone I knew that I might need, Somehow I knew that I might need my dog. When I took you to see my friend, it was really him. The coyote is my girl's friend. I wanted my dog to sniff you. When you ran into the house, I had to be rough with him. I pushed him inside your car, making him yell with pain. He's too big and could hardly fit over the seat. I told him right then to maul you to shreds. I knew that if you had been badly bitten by my dog, you would have been helpless and I could have finished you off without any trouble. You escaped again, but you couldn't leave the house. I knew then that I had to be patient and wait for the darkness. Then the wind changed direction, and I was sure of my success. The Nawal had told me that he knew without a doubt that you would like me as a woman. It was a matter of waiting for the right time. The Nawal said that you would kill yourself once you realized I had stolen your power. But in case I failed to steal it, or in case you didn't kill yourself, or in case I didn't want to keep you alive as my prisoner, I should then use my headband to choke you to death. He even showed me the place where I had to throw your carcass, a bottomless pit, a crack in the mountains, not too far from here, where goats always disappear. The Nawal never mentioned your awesome side, though. I have told you that one of us was supposed to die tonight. I didn't know it was going to be me. The Nawal gave me the feeling that I would win. How cruel of him not to tell me everything about you. Think of me, Dona Soledad. I know even less than you did. It's not the same. The Nawal prepared me for years for this. I knew every detail. You were in my bag. The Nawal even showed me the leaves that I should always keep fresh and handy to make you numb. I put them in the tub as if they were for fragrance. You didn't notice I used another kind of leaf for my tub. You fell for everything I had prepared for you, and yet your awesome side won out in the end. What do you mean, my awesome side? The one that hit me and will kill me tonight. Your horrendous double that came out to finish me off. I will never forget it if I live. I will never forget it, and if I live, which I doubt, I will never be the same. Did it look like me? It was you, of course, but not as you look now. I can't really say what it looked like. What I want to think about, what I want to think about, when I want to think about it, I get dizzy. I told her that my fleeting perception that she had left her body with the impact of my blow. I intended to prod her with my account. It seemed to me that the reason behind the whole event had been to force us to draw from sources that are ordinarily barred from us. I had positively given her a dreadful blow. I had caused profound damage to her body, and yet I could not have done it by myself. I did not feel I had hit her with my left fist. The enormous red lump on her forehead attested to that. Yet I had no swelling in my knuckles, or even the slightest pain or discomfort in them. A blow of that magnitude would have broken my hand. Upon hearing my description of how I had seen her Huddling against the wall, she became thoroughly desperate. I asked her if she had any inkling of what I had seen, such as a sensation of leaving her body, or a fleeting perception of the room. I know now that I am doomed, she said. Very few survive a touch of the double. If my soul was left already, I wouldn't survive. If my soul has left already, I won't survive. I'll get weaker and weaker until I die. Her eyes had a wild glare. She raised herself and seemed to be on the verge of striking me, but she slumped back. You've taken my soul, she said. You must have it in your pouch by now. Why did you have to tell me that, though? I swore to her that I had no intention of hurting her, and that I acted in whatever form only in self-defense, and therefore I bore no malice towards her. If you don't have my soul in your pouch, it's even worse, she said. It must be roaming aimlessly around. I will never get it back then. Dona Soledad seemed to be void of energy. Her voice seemed to be weaker. I wanted her to go and lie down, but she refused to leave the table. The Nawal said that if I failed completely, I should then give you his message, she said. He told me to tell you that he had replaced your body a long time ago. You are himself now. What did he mean by that? He's a sorcerer. He entered into your body and replaced its luminosity. Now you shine like the Nawal himself. You're not your father's son anymore. You are the Nawal himself. Dona Soledad stood up. She was groggy. She appeared to want to say something else, but had trouble vocalizing. She walked to her room. I helped her to the door. She did not want me to enter. She dropped the blanket that covered her and lay down on her bed. She asked in a very soft voice if I wanted to go to a hill a short distance away and watch from there to see if the wind was coming. She added in a most casual manner that I should take her dog with me. Somehow her request did not sound right. I said that I would climb up on the hill and I would climb up on the roof and look from there. She turned her back to me and said that the least I could do for her was to take her dog to the hill so that he could lure the wind. I became very irritated with her. The room in the darkness gave out a most eerie feeling. I went into the kitchen and got 2 lanterns and brought them back with me. At the sight of the light, she screamed hysterically. I let out a yell myself, but for a different reason. When the light hit the room, I saw the floor curl up like a cocoon around her bed. My perception was so fleeting that the next instant I could have sworn that the shadow of the wire protective mask of the lantern, could have sworn that the shadow of the wire protective mask of the lantern had created a ghostly scene. My phantom perceptions made me furious. I shook her by the shoulders. She wept like a child and promised not to try any more of her tricks. I placed the lanterns on the chest of drawers, and she fell asleep instantly. By mid-morning the wind had changed. I felt a strong gust coming through the north window. Around noon, Dona Soledad came out again. She seemed a bit wobbly. The redness of her eyes had disappeared, and the swelling of her forehead had diminished. There was hardly any visible lump. I felt that it was time for me to leave. I told her that although I had written down the message she had given me from Don Juan, it did not clarify anything. You're not your father's son anymore. You are now the Nawal himself, she said. There was something truly incongruous about me. If years before I had been helpless, and Dona Soledad had actually tried to kill me. But at that moment, when she was speaking to me, I had forgotten the horror of that event. And yet there was another part of me that could spend days mulling over meaningless confrontations with people concerning my personality or my work. That part of me seemed real. That part seemed to be the real me, the me that I had known my whole life. The me, however, who had gone through a bout with death that night and then forgotten about it, was not real. It was me, and yet it was not me. In the light of such incongruities, Don Juan claims seemed to be far less to be less far-fetched, but still unacceptable. Donna Soledad seemed absent-minded. She smiled peacefully. "Oh, there they are," she said suddenly. "How fortunate for me. My girls are here. Now they'll take care of me." She seemed to have a turn for the worse. She looked as strong as ever, but her behavior was more dissociative. My fears mounted. I did not know whether to leave her there or take her to the hospital in the city several hundred miles away. All of a sudden she jumped up like a little child and ran out the front door and down the driveway toward the main road. To the main road. The dog ran after her. I hurriedly got in my car in order to catch up with her. I had to drive down the path in reverse, since there was no space to turn around. As I approached the road, I saw through the back window that Donna Soledad was surrounded by 4 young women. End of chapter.